Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm here today with Joe McCann, who is the CEO of Slingshot Insights, which is a market research firm that focused on the healthcare industry. And they also acquired Truth on Call, which is a platform many listeners know, which is another firm focused on the healthcare industry. I'll let Joe explain it all to us. Joe, welcome to the show.
Will, great to be here. Appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to talk to your listeners about what we can offer.
So, Joe, let's start just with an overview of the different types of research products that you offer.
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned, we acquired Truth on Call at the end of last year, and we now have a nice round suite of products for healthcare um, partners and professionals. Our core products really are two different things. One is traditional phone interviews where, a management consultant or an individual will request from us a type of thought leader or expert. They're traditionally physicians, but we also work with hospital administrators, patent lawyers, all sorts of people in the healthcare space that are important. And it's very similar to kind of the traditional competitive landscape out there. And these calls go from 30 to 60 minutes typically. And one thing that's nice about our product is that we offer a recording and a transcript at no additional charge of each of those conversations. We have a small team here that only thinks about healthcare. And so we provide a lot of guidance on what we think the right relevant person is. We can do custom recruiting through PubMed searches and university databases, as well as just individuals in the field who have the right number of patients or types of patients to make the conversation worthwhile. And then the other complementary product we have now after this acquisition is a large physician panel where we can go out and run surveys in 24 to 36 hours usually, where we work with the team on really fine tuning the best answer and then run the report for them and give them back both individual and summary level information. And then going back to that call type product, we can follow up with individual respondents and dig a little deeper on why they said what they said on the questions, really providing a nice multi-layered research product for people to go back to their clients with. And this is nice in a lot of ways because you can kind of use any one part of those uh, tools in your process, whether it's pitching a client or on an engagement. We really can work with you at any level and with no minimums.
So, and that's so helpful if you're on a project. It's difficult to get physicians on the phone. They obviously consider their time very valuable. What are the different ways that someone can, specify the specific type of person that they want to talk to? I imagine they could clearly do it sort of by specialty, but can you also say, well, I want someone who works at an academic hospital or more of a general practitioner or a smaller town? Or could you say, I want someone involved in this specific study? What are the different ways that you can specify the population that you're interested in?
Yeah, well, those are all great ways. You could definitely do any of them. We work with teams and individuals to really target the screening questions before they get on the phone. So we'll screen for things such as involvement, data awareness or willingness to review, number of patients, and that's kind of more on the broader type of um, request. Hey, have you ever used this software before? That type of thing. What we also do, and I think we really stand out on, is targeting physicians or researchers that are really thought leaders based on their published literature or their positions at different universities. And so we'll reach out to them directly and engage them in either, work with a prior relationship that we have or explain to them why we think that they're particularly useful for the call. And we really try and think of our experts like clients as well as our clients. And we've found over the years that kind of showing that respect to them, being mindful of why you're emailing, not over emailing, things like that, that are really kind of just my behind the scenes things for a network like ours make a big difference in the relationship and able to get these guys and women on the phone when you need them in a pinch because they know that our emails aren't sent to 1,000 people just scattershot. There's actually somebody who's been really thinking about it, and a lot of times even someone from management will reach on our end will reach out and say, hey, you know Dr. So and so, we'd really like to speak to you on this specific paper. Here's the link to it. Our client has a PhD themselves. They're always well prepared. And those types of little minor, just good engagement practices make a big difference in terms of how we get these people to spend some time with us.
Mm-hmm. Um, could you walk us through the process, sort of end to end? Once one of your clients submits a request, okay,
Mhm.
I want to talk to this specific type of specialist. What's your process like? Of like, do you first? I mean, do you guys have a quick call with that expert to just validate that they're interested in it, or just walk me through all the different steps that are involved?
Yeah, sure. So we'll have a once we have a relationship established with a firm or an individual, we'll share with them the best way to contact us. So basically, just send us an email outlining the scope of the project. If it's extremely straightforward, we'll say we understand. If it's not, we'll set up maybe a 1 minute call might be very helpful to the requesting partner and just understand what needs to be done. And then we'll put it into our process where we look at our existing database of experts that we have relationships with. We'll look at kind of arm's length relationships we have. And then if we don't think that there's anything that really fits exactly what this project needs, we'll do some custom recruiting and even go out and say, maybe this actual academic center is the right spot for this disease or this particular mechanism or something like that. And so we'll look at kind of that full approach of where we can get the best person and then engage the experts on our end that way. And you will usually have some dialogue back and forth with the expert about whether or not they feel like they're comfortable and they can meet the client's needs. And once we have that done, we do a basic onboarding and training. I know a lot of your clients probably aren't public market investors, or the members of this network aren't public market investors, but that is kind of our heritage. We have a lot of that. So we have really strong onboarding compliance documents, kind of just going over confidential information. All that type of stuff is done before any expert gets on our network. And so we handle all that behind the scenes. And then it's really just about finding time when both parties can get on the phone and talk about the topic that's needed. Usually those calls can be as short as 30 minutes, but 30 to 60 minutes can cover a lot on these types of issues.
Okay. How do you recruit new members into your kind of database of talent?
Yeah, so we have the ability, and we get new people to sign up every day. We have a platform where physicians that are looking to be participants in surveys and other things can sign up. But a lot of it's really been driven over the last 6 years, handmade basically, where somebody comes in with a request and we identify the need and we proactively go out and say, hey, would you like to be part of our network? This is the project we're working on. And we've really found that to be the way to get the highest caliber people. We're looking at their backgrounds and bios, and somebody on our team is proactively reaching out to them. And so after 6 years of that, now we have 150,000 contacts in our database of people that we think are relevant, and that's either from them being excited about doing surveys and sharing what they know, or us kind of identifying them and saying, hey, people would like to discuss this with you.
Yeah. Now, I understand that you have a product. Tell me if you still have it, where if it was a hedge fund or an investor interviewing an expert, that there was, in some cases, you would actually make that so you could have subscribers who could just listen into those calls live. Could you tell us about that product?
Yeah, to be honest, Will, that was the original inspiration for starting Slingshot Insights. I had been on the buy side at a hedge fund, SAC Capital, which is now Point 72, really covering global healthcare on a small team. And I was doing hundreds of these calls a year, spending like $1 million a year on experts and surveys, just because I was a finance person with no background and really found them invaluable when it came to understanding whether a press release was good or there's really a market for this new, pathway or new, delivery mechanism for a drug. And so when I left the firm and was kind of waiting to start a firm with my partner, I realized how much it was missing. And so I had this resource that I was using every day and really relying on, and then was going out kind of on my own and looking at the world of Twitter and seeking alpha and all these people who were writing about stocks, and realized that none of them had access to it. And so the idea that I kind of tried to marry together was, well, if some of these people who are so passionate about the stocks could split the time and the cost of the expert, and one of them could take the lead because they, are writing blog posts about it and putting real money behind the names, they could take $1,000 or $1,500 call and bring it down to under 100. And so our original platform that we launched in 2015 and really 2016 was all about trying to find like-minded stock trackers to chip in and just get the real story from a physician or somebody on one of these calls. And the kind of interesting thing about that business is that I never really thought it was going to be used by large professional investors. I kind of thought they would always want to spend the money and have the private conversation. But over the years, we've actually found many who feel more comfortable in an open format for compliance reasons, or do want to save 50 to 75% on the calls that they lead. And so we actually now have a repository of thousands of calls that anybody can go on our website and purchase and read the transcript of, or listen to the recording of, on their own time. And then calls that are happening every day. I think we have two scheduled for today where you can go on and look at an update in the DLBCL landscape after the latest conference, or some new psych drug that's coming out. But how's a physician prescribing it? All that's available on our database, and you can, like you mentioned, you can access it as a subscriber for $50 a month. You get to join one of those calls, or you can chip in on any call that you like for usually 60 to $120.
Well, that's amazing. So for 50, you said for $50 a month, you can listen to as many of these calls as you want.
You get one live call, and you get three calls that are over 4 weeks old for $50 a month. Yep.
Oh, okay. That'd actually be a pretty fascinating way to develop your own interviewing skills by listening to some, experienced investors doing these things.
Yeah, a lot of our investors are PhDs or MDs themselves. Many of them run significant money professionally, and to view us as a nice, safe, easy way to access these experts and get their insights.
And then for the experts who are willing to be an interviewer for one of those public calls, I guess you said that there's some compliance benefits because it's not considered, private data. They're trying to learn it, but they're saying, like, if the rest of the world wants to hear this, it's open to them as well.
Yeah, and I think so. We actually had a white paper written by a former SEC branch chief and enforcement officer prior to launching, where he basically extolled the virtues of an open, transparent platform over these private calls. And I don't know if you recall, but the industry had some issues 8 or 9 years ago with some conversations that went over the line of what maybe should be said to a public investor. And so, kind of coming out of that period of everyone trying to get on the right side of the law again in the expert network world, we engaged a former SEC officer to really just talk about how, if you're going to be playing it safe, it's not that the private calls are always bad. We actually offer private calls, and we've never had a problem. But if you really want to go as safe as possible, having something that anybody in the world could access for a set price, having something where other people on the line might be listening and kind of keeps you honest, all those things go a long way to kind of having the safest, most productive conversation. If you were to look at all the different options out there. And so, we're really proud of that product and how people are able to use it to put in kind of their own level of effort to get the information they need. You can just listen. You can come and propose a project yourself and have it all set up. You can really kind of engage with these expert calls any way that you're comfortable on this type of product.
We're kind of used to the idea of a long tail and some real breakthrough blockbuster type things in just about everything from music to books to salaries of celebrities. Have you had any recorded calls that were sort of blockbuster that got way more downloads than anything else?
We definitely had a few over the years. We actually had a great one with a reporter who's pretty well known in the healthcare space, where he was going through ways that press releases can mislead you. And it was one of our first calls that was of any scale, and we had, I think, over 300 people try and pay and join, and it crashed our site. It was in the very first days of our thing, and it really just outperformed anything that I anticipated. And years later, we're actually now official partners with his publication, and we do an event every month with him and his team. So we got past that initial excitement. But yeah, every once in a while, a call will catch on and really get people's attention. But in reality, most of our calls are 3 to 12 people that want to chip in, and they're saving 90% when you get 12 people. And it's just it's a niche topic that sounds really interesting, and it's in your portfolio, so you want to hear what somebody has to say about the market potential of whatever's going on.
Let's talk a little about the Truth on Call product. Tell me about the surveys that you run.
Yeah, the Truth on Call product's been terrific for us this year. I think it's really rounded us out as a market research product. Being able to offer that survey complementary product has been good. And I think a lot of people, as they start to understand really what it can do, have started to use it more. So, if you want to do one KOL call on a topic, that's interesting. But if you do 20 with the 5 or 10 key questions in writing, and you can get that back in 36 hours, it can really tell you a lot about what's going on out there, and you're not getting a small end of information. So the Truth on Call product has been a really nice way to get a little bit more structured data around the questions that people have, and has worked well for us. I think both in terms of new customers. We didn't really have many management consulting type customers or pharma type customers before. Now we do, and so it's been a great rounding out of the business.
What have you learned about what works well or best practices when creating a survey that's going to be filled out by physicians?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we see a lot is the narrowness of the question. So physicians are busy people as well as anyone else is, and while they are very good at reading and putting in careful thought, asking a specific question that is very hard to misinterpret is the real art of the survey business. And so having either two things where you're not sure what you're talking about, or having a vague question where all the answers aren't necessarily getting to the same point, those are the biggest snafus that we see. And so when somebody comes to us with a survey, we have our team review it and basically create a little bit more of a formalized document saying, okay, this is the exact type of answer you're going to get, whether it's a drop down or a multiple choice or an open-ended, and then also some tweaking of the words to try and explain, well, maybe we should do these as two screeners instead of one, things like that. We get a real firm agreement on it beforehand, and having that document correct and well thought out is really the secret to getting the kind of results you want.
So, can you give me an example of a survey question that is worded, awkwardly or ambiguously, and then how you might change that to a much more tightly focused question?
Yeah, a lot of times it'll be around vagueness in terms of how much someone, do you like this type of side effect, or do you like this type of efficacy? And so you'll read the question, and they want to be an open-ended answer. And what you can do is create a little bit more structure around it and say, well, why don't we use a more specific word that really makes the person understand what you're trying to get here, and then let's give buckets for them to pick from, because they might write back to you, oh yeah, it's much better, oh that's not as good, and in reality you're not going to be able to understand what each of those people mean. So putting like a standardized scale that people have to pick from, maybe 5 buckets on out of 1 to 100, is a lot better tool to get back than having somebody write open-ended, kind of adjective based words. And so anytime we can get more of a number base, or a selection of 4, much better, greatly improved, not improved, something like that, rather than trying to leave it to the responder, we get a lot more useful data that you can actually then chart and think about in constructive ways.
I'm always wary of including open-ended questions in surveys that I send out. They seem like a good idea, and like you'd love someone to write something, but then it's often really hard to get people to write very much on those. Are there ever
Yeah.
cases where you do recommend an open-ended question? How many open-ended questions in one survey is the right number?
Well, I think it depends a little bit on how big the survey is, but there are certainly times that are good and useful. So we're running a lot of surveys around drug launches. It's okay. Well, how many patients have you started this month? How many patients have discontinued this month? Things like that. And then like one of the questions will be, do you plan to increase your usage or not? And so yes or no. And then, okay, why did you say yes or no? And you can actually get some really good insights in those types of situations where they'll say, well, it's not in the compendium, or it's tough to get reimbursed, or actually I'm having really bad side effects with this drug, and I'm not going to use it unless I absolutely have to. And so doctors can write little short things like that, particularly when they're explaining a previous answer. But I think
That
you're right, where you go in and just say, hey, explain to me what your views on this data are. You're going to get probably pretty lazy responses, and have a really hard time understanding what the doctors think if you just say, hey, what do you think of that phase 3 data?
hmm.
And we find that even in phone calls.
I'm,
Some
I'm,
doctors will have something like ready to fire off, but a lot of times it's helpful to ask very targeted questions, obviously.
I'm even surprised though that you'd say open-ended after that. Why did you continue the survey, or why'd you continue the program or not? I would have thought that on that one you'd say like it's better to have a set of we know 90% of the answers are going to be one of these six. So give people those 6 or 7 choices and then give an other block. And maybe people do a forced rank or only pick like the top 3 reasons that you left the study or something like that. But as opposed to making it an open-ended response for that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of ways, and every person. Well, I guess one of the things I'd say is that every person that we work with, we want to meet your expectations and best practices that you're comfortable with. So we're always willing to be creative and come up with something that is more of a forced rank or whatever you're thinking of. But we have had a lot of success, I would say, on those short kind of explain yourself type things after you've already kind of understood what their main viewpoint is, and so that's just something that we've had work for
Hmm.
a lot of small short. I mean, these are still surveys that are under 10 questions, and so
Yeah.
at the end of at the end of a 2 or 3 minute question survey, or a 2 or 3 minute survey, people are willing to write something out shortly usually.
Interesting. So you said under 10 questions. Are most of your surveys under 10 questions? Is that
So for the finance side, that's definitely pretty common. The client will have 5 to 10 questions, and usually it's around volume or how the expectations for a drug or something like that. I think that they're more in the world of short type surveys. And then for the pharmaceutical companies and the management consultants that we've worked with are much larger, 20, 30, 40 questions. And obviously that's much more involved and a little bit more difficult to get the experts to sit through. But yeah, that's definitely stuff that we do as well. I've seen it more as a break across kind of customer type than topic type.
interesting? How are physicians typically filling out these surveys? Is it on their phone typically or on a computer?
So when we look, I mean, it's a pretty even breakdown, particularly for a short for a short survey. I think a lot of physicians are doing them on their phone.
Hmm.
But when we look at kind of some of the analytics on our end, we can see that it's a mixture still. I think a lot of particularly physicians are still desktop based and spend time in their office, and at the end of the day, they look at their emails and say, "Oh, it's an interesting opportunity." I'm actually amazed sometimes at the level of KOLs who do agree to participate in these surveys because I know how much they cost and how hard they are to get on the phone. But I think when they see this easy on your own schedule type opportunity, they almost want to put their information out there into the surveys. So we actually see a lot of really great names kind of taking these anonymous surveys, and it's reflected in the patient numbers that they disclose and other things. But you can just see that there's certain people out there who want their information included in the dialogue, which is nice.
What's the best time of day to email a physician if you want that person to respond?
I don't know if there's a perfect time, but I think the thing that I would say more than the time of day that's perfect is how immediate it is. So we get a real influx of responses quickly, and if an hour goes, if more than an hour and a half goes by, the responses really trickle off. So it's less of a time of day thing and more of I got this email, I have a minute, okay. And so I've actually been a little bit surprised or kind of found that curious, but there's ways for us to re-engage them in the future, and we can get the results done. But it is really a quick, see the opportunity, take the opportunity type situation typically.
Have you seen many trends over the last year or two or three of the what consultants are interested in and the types of surveys that they're running?
Um, I don't know if I've seen a hard trend. I do know that in the spring, when this all was kind of unfolding, the COVID pandemic, we had a real influx of people trying to understand what's going on the ground. Um, Advocacy groups, government kind of awareness groups, and different states trying to say, is there enough PPE? Is there enough ventilators in my hospital system and things like that, and really trying to use us as a way to ascertain what's going on in the world. So I'd say for the first 6 months of the year, we had a lot of that type of work. We have some nice published blog posts where we powered physician surveys, skilled nursing home surveys with some partners, and things like that. Just trying to then go to the government and say, hey, you need to actually address this. Like there isn't enough beds or ICU beds or whatever the issue is, or there is actually, and we can feel a little bit better about it at night. So that was definitely a trend for a while, and there was, I think, a big drop off in terms of some of the more traditional um, market research type work. All these physician centers were down, and people weren't maybe necessarily thinking about what the national landscape looks like for the next 10 years. but that's all coming back now. And I'd say since August, we've seen a real return to kind of traditional market work and people trying to understand where their drugs fit in the landscape and all that type of stuff. So it's been nice to see a little bit of a normalization, even as everything's so crazy. But that's really probably the only market trend we've seen over the last year.
What are the different categories of projects or reasons for doing this kind of research? You've talked about one of them or a couple. You mentioned, for public investors trying to understand how a study might play out and the impact on that pharmaceutical company. You've talked about pharma companies doing research about a drug launch that they're planning. What are some other common use cases that you see for investors or pharma companies or consultants for using your service?
Yeah, so I think an interesting one we've been having a lot of traction with lately is um, a company or a consultant is working with a firm that has a technology that, let's say, a drug delivery technology or some sort of approach, and they want to understand which companies or which drugs or which indications would benefit from that. So whether it's a different route of drug delivery or something along those lines, and they can go very quickly with our type of product and say, okay, well, let's talk to 20 neurologists or let's talk to 20 nephrologists really quickly and just say, would you temperature check here? Like, is that something that would be interesting? And so then internally they have the ability to put real data behind the decision-making process of, well, should we spend the time to do the preclinical studies and all that type of stuff before we put any real bench work into work? We should just try and understand, is this something physicians would want 5 years from now if we were able to pull it off? So that's been a really interesting thing to watch and see. We're seeing that both from consultants that are pitching clients as well as pharma companies kind of internally saying, hey, I want to go to my board with real insights. I don't want to be going to my board saying, hey, we got this new idea this month. And so that's been a great thing we've been working on. And then also just as people are trying to partner in the U.S., that's another big area that we see. They maybe have a really interesting technology in their home country, Europe, Japan, China, other areas, and they want to understand whether there's a demand in the U.S. market for it. And so before they go to their partnering conversations or before they really try and engage the pharmaceutical industry in the United States, they'll come to us and say, hey, we want to get a nice capture of why this is interesting and compelling. So when we go and talk to these business development type people, we have a real substantial conversation, not just them saying, I don't really know, it doesn't sound too exciting. So just really putting firepower behind the decision-making processes at these firms and when clients are, whether it's consultants trying to help them or management teams themselves, these types of insights can be really useful.
Makes
And
sense.
quickly and affordably obtained. I think the affordability of it, of being able to just spend a few $1,000s and have a really clear data set that you can lean on for maybe years, is a really powerful tool for people.
You mentioned earlier that when people come to you with a survey, you'll help review it and give them some feedback. For someone who hasn't done a lot of surveys before, if they sort of know what question that they're trying to answer, will your team help them craft the survey? And do you have kind of a library of kind of standardized question types?
Yeah, we have both. We don't really disclose the library because a lot of them are from clients, and it's it's a little bit proprietary. But certainly, the institutional knowledge of what makes a good question allows us to guide any team. I would say there's no reason to be afraid of oh, I don't know enough to run a survey. They're not. They can be done wrong, but they're not such a unwieldy beast that one should shy away from it. And our team here is very comfortable writing them ourselves. I mean, part of the reason that I'm happy that I chose to start this company is I spent 5 years running hundreds of surveys on all types of things I was interested in and had a great mentor teaching me that. And so, coming at it from that position and then having the whole team here kind of think about it the way that I was trained. And then also having the past founder of Truth on Call teach us as well. She was a management consultant with a great background at McKinsey and all other firms. She spent 12 years doing these surveys. So between the people that are here, we can take any project under our wing and get it to where the client needs it to be.
What's your guidance to folks on when is the right time to do a survey? how much qualitative research should someone do first, doing a few interviews or so forth, just to make sure that you understand the broad parameters or the terms of an industry or a specific area before launching a more quantitative survey?
Yeah, I think that comes with a lot of the person's background. So if the person's spent years in the field and they're really like an oncology specialist and this is just a new product that's a slight tweak, I would say something like 1 to 2 calls might be enough to make sure, just a temperature check that there isn't anything in this that you don't understand already. But if it's something that maybe is a little bit new to the person and they're saying, well, I've done a lot of work on drug formulation, but I've never thought about Lipitor before or something like that. I usually recommend 3 to 5, and it depends on the budget. But you just want to make sure that you're hearing the right things over and over. And usually by the third call or the fourth call, I'm saying it's 80% or 75% as long as the first call, and you're kind of just saying, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's when you kind of know that you got it, and you're going from Googling words and making sure that you've really read all the literature to having conversations about um, nuances in the drug, and they're saying, "Oh, where'd you think of that? I didn't even realize that question." And the experts even saying things like that to you because you learned it on a prior call, and you're kind of having a real dialogue. That's when you really understand what you're looking at, and you're ready to go get some robust data, like you said, more quantitative stuff behind your project.
What do you think motivates the physicians to participate in these? I mean, obviously, the money is a big help. Um, do they have other reasons beyond that? I mean, are they just intellectually interested in what consultants or investors might be curious about, or are they trying to get their point of view out in the world? Like, what gets physicians willing to spend time filling these out?
I think that the money helps. Obviously, that's kind of the cost of entry, but I think there's a lot more to it. Like you mentioned, I think some of them are just altruistic and want good information in the world. Some of them, I think, enjoy being asked. There's a certain pride in being a person who's being engaged on a call and can share their intellect. And I think a lot of people just enjoy talking about what they've spent their time on and know. And there's only so many places in the world where maybe you can talk about the nuances of a type 2 diabetes drug. Against a drug that doesn't exist yet. And so I think that there's just a kind of an intellectual curiosity, like you said, but also just you do it for a reason. You spend all your time and life on it. And I think a lot of people really get a kick out of the conversations. And actually, a lot of doctors, like I said, by the third or fourth call, you might be bringing a lot to the table yourself. Whether it's talking about some other paper that they hadn't thought about before, or you're kind of pushing them on a topic. So I think that they view a good conversation. We actually get a lot of emails from experts that say, that was a great call. I really enjoyed that. And so I think that when you get to that point in your own research, it can be a rich, textured conversation that the expert enjoys as much as you do. And so I think by being involved in this whole field, they're getting some different insights and they're getting to hear from these people who are putting a lot of time in researching. And a lot of times they're directly engaging with the company. And even sometimes it can result in a relationship with the company or, kind of being involved in clinical trials and things like that, because obviously these companies are trying to make inroads with the thought leaders in the sector that they're working with, and trials need to be run by people in the field with good patient populations and that are set up to do it. So we've made those kind of introductions over the years, and so I think it's just a really nice, mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge and everybody kind of trying to work to the same goal, right? Of curing whatever the illness is or making the patient's lives better in the way that makes sense.
How do you identify key opinion leaders? So that's a term that I hear a lot. You've mentioned it a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, you know, just the kind of the prestige of the medical school that they teach at, or their seniority, or is it people that have been the author on a really important paper? Like, how do you, of the hundreds of thousands of physicians, how do you determine what counts as a key opinion leader?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of an art more than a science, but there's definitely some key attributes that we look to. And you mentioned a couple of them there. One of the biggest ones is publishing, and that they have a kind of a rich publishing history in the disease or the topic that you're looking to talk about, and that it's current. They didn't stop publishing in 2002. Another one is the university that they're at, but that's not end all be all. Just because there's also a lot of great universities in the country and the world, so it's kind of a cross of those, and then also just the number of patients that they see and how much of a speaking engagement they have, if they've been on panels and things like that. And so you can kind of look at this whole snapshot and say, hey, this person is someone who others look to for guidance here, and whether that's because they helped write guidelines or have been presenting on stages at major medical conferences for the last 10 years. You can kind of understand it. And again, that's something that we work with the client on to make sure they're happy with it. But we take a look at that and and make our recommendation on those factors among some others.
Great. So if someone wants to find Slingshot or Truth on Call, where should they go online if they wanted to think about getting your help on a project?
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to go on, if any of the listeners would like to go on, just check out these open calls that we have. You can create a free account and see what the interview goal is, the expert's bio is, what kind of questions are being asked, the companies that are going to be covered, just by going to slingshotinsights.com. That's our web platform where you can find everything. Truth on Call you can also go to, but that's a little bit more for physicians to sign up and get part of our survey product. The easiest way to reach us is just to email support@truthoncall.com, and that'll get you right into our sales funnel. Or you can email me personally. I'm always available to talk to any new clients, and that's Joe, Joe, at slingshotinsights.com. And really over email, we'll just set up a phone call, get to know each other a little bit, and get started on a project. We can get things in the field same day if it's that type of a turnaround. We're doing that for a client actually right this morning. They emailed us Monday, and we're in the field right now, hopefully getting results by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So we understand that sometimes these pitches come in a pinch without a lot of time to maybe do all the things you wish you could do on it. And so this is a way that you can engage with us really quickly and get something really substantial and robust to your client in a matter of hours or days.
Fantastic. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining today. We'll include those links in the show notes. And if you're doing some market research in the healthcare industry, definitely check out Slingshot Insights and Truth on Call. They're quite affordably priced, great service. I've heard really great things about your firm. And thanks for joining.
Well, one last thing. You mentioned the price at the end. I almost forgot to mention this. For Umbrex members, we want to get this relationship going. We've had some great experiences with the Umbrex members over the first half of the year of owning Truth on Call, but we'd love to expand on that and meet more teams that are part of this great network. And so we could offer 25% off your first survey with us, or call package. If you want to do just KOL calls, we can offer you 25% off on the first one, and then hopefully start a really long relationship in helping you with your clients.
Fantastic. So for listeners who are, I think that I trust Joe. That also extends to folks who are not Umbrex members. If you're listening to this, reach out to Joe, mention that you heard him on the show, and ask for that discount to get you started.
Yep, just mention that you heard us on the show, and we'll get you set up.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much for joining.
All right, appreciate it, Will. I'd love to talk to you again anytime. Thanks a lot.